As long as people use tactics to oppress or restrict other people from being free, there is work to be done. These timeless words by Mrs. Rosa Parks remind us that the fight for freedom is an ongoing struggle. They urge us to resist oppressive forces for the sake of future generations. Today, her message holds relevance as book banning emerges as one of the most dangerous forms of modern oppression. These bans not only limit what students can learn, but also hide the uncomfortable truths of our nation's history and restrict access to diverse perspectives. Book banning is not just about removing content, but it is a glaring reminder that the fight for intellectual freedom and identity remains unfinished. Just as Mrs. Parks and other heroes took a stand against the forces that sought to restrict the freedoms of Black Americans, we must stand against book banning to preserve our right to knowledge. To create a society that values justice and informed citizenship, we must resist this oppressive force, which harms learning in three major ways: depriving intellectual freedom, hiding historical truths, and restricting diverse perspectives. First, the deprivation of intellectual freedom caused by book banning brutally limits knowledge and represses the ability to think critically. This not only impedes individual growth, but also undermines the development of future generations. Growing up, my parents instilled in me the importance of education. My father often reminded me that success in life requires the ability to think critically for myself. My mother reinforced this lesson, teaching me that developing critical thinking skills begins with a love for learning and a willingness to examine all perspectives. She would always say, education is the key to unlocking doors and creating opportunities. These lessons stay with me from my earliest days in pre-K, where I discovered the joy of storytelling, to high school, where I was encouraged to think deeply about diverse perspectives. Education is about more than academics. It's about learning to navigate the world with empathy and curiosity. Book banning threatens this by narrowing the range of ideas and viewpoints students can access, ultimately restraining their ability to grow into informed, thoughtful adults. Sixth grade marked a turning point in my education. Growing up in a small, majority white town in Alabama, I often found my perspective limited to a narrow set of cultural experiences. Recognizing this, my parents decided to homeschool me, broadening my exposure to new ideas and histories. One of the first books I read during this time was Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor. This powerful story gave me my first real understanding of the systemic inequalities faced by Black communities in American history, which marked one of my earliest memories of feeling free to learn about all of history. Secondly, book banning harms learning by attempting to hide historical truths. The lessons I learned from Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry still resonate with me, emphasizing the importance of preserving access to books that tell the whole truth about our past. Unfortunately, this book and similar ones are now among those at risk of being banned. The goal of these bans is clear: to censor information about America's uncomfortable truths and maintain a sanitized version of history. This not only violates our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, but also deprives students, especially children of color, of the opportunity to see their histories and experiences reflected in text. I often think about the children who won't have the same opportunities I had to explore different perspectives. Book banning ensures that many will grow up with a distorted view of history, unable to engage in a meaningful conversation about our nation's past. As a society, we cannot afford to lose these stories because they challenge us to confront the darker chapters of our history and grow from them. Currently, the issue of book banning has reached alarming levels. During the 2023-2024 school year, there were 10,046 recorded instances of book bans, a record high. This trend is likely to worsen under the re-election of Donald Trump, who has consistently pushed for the suppression of what he calls divisive and one-sided accounts of history. He has advocated for cutting federal funding to schools that teach critical race theory or including content he deems inappropriate, further fueling the rise of book bans. Trump's rhetoric ignores the realities of America's history, which has never been a universal experience of greatness. For marginalized groups, history is often marred by systemic oppression and exclusion. By attempting to erase these truths, book banning perpetuates the marginalization of these communities and denies all students the chance to learn about the full scope of our nation's history. Lastly, book bans can narrow the scope of what students can learn and discuss by restricting diverse perspectives. Dr. Liza Tolleson, author of The Identity Conscious Educator, explains, shying away from these topics, we miss opportunities to help young people explore challenging topics with people they trust, to give young people a place to ask challenging questions that help them to make sense of the world. If we deny students access to books that challenge their thinking, we deny them of the opportunity to grow into empathetic and informed citizens. For me, it is troubling to imagine a future where the books that shaped my thinking and introduced me to new ideas, cultures, and histories are no longer available. Whether someone is mastering math or refining communication skills, every student deserves the freedom to explore, question, and grow while exploring diverse points of view. By banning books, we strip students of the tools they need to navigate an increasingly complex world. The fight against book banning is about more than keeping books on shelves. It is about defending the fundamental freedoms that shape a just and informed society. When we silence important voices and erase diverse experiences, we lose pieces of our shared humanity. In retrospect, Rosa Parks' call to action reminds us that the freedom that diversity brings is not a given, but it must be fought for and protected for everyone. As we face the challenges of book banning, we must take a stand to preserve intellectual freedom and ensure that all students have access to knowledge and perspectives that empower them to succeed. This means advocating for policies that protect educational access, supporting those that fight censorship, and amplifying the voices of those whose stories are at risk of being silenced. In the words of Mrs. Parks, there is work to be done. That work begins with us. We must resist the forces of oppression that seek to restrict access to knowledge and deny students the right to learn. Together, we can protect the stories, histories, and ideas that inspire us to build a better, more equitable future. Let us commit to standing against book bans and fighting for the intellectual liberty that forms the foundation of our free and just society.